I will introduce an immigration bill immediately and have it sent to the appropriate committees to begin movement.
A very determined Joe Biden announcing his plan for immigration reform just prior to being sworn in as president. With intense opposition from the GOP minority, will reform be part of a large sweeping immigration bill or a series of smaller scale legislation or executive orders? And how will all this affect regular Americans? Joining me now with analysis is the Deputy Director of NumbersUSA Education and Research Foundation, Chmielenski. Chris, thanks for being here. I want to start with Joe Biden's changed a bit since he promised to introduce this immigration bill. Big legislation that might include amnesty for illegal aliens in country. That seems unlikely, at least right away. What impact will the president's flurry of executive orders have?
Well, I think it's only going to make it even more difficult for them to pass some sort of immigration reform, mainly through the Senate and the House, where the Democrats control. I think it'll be fairly easy to get it through. Although I think even if legislation reflected what the White House put out in their outline, I think that might have even been difficult to get through the House with a lack of any sort of immigration enforcement. But the Senate is where the tough haul is. They're going to need to pick up at least 10 Republican senators in order to get over a filibuster, overcome a filibuster. And at the same time, they're going to need to hold on to the moderates like Kyrsten Sinema in Arizona and Joe Manchin in West Virginia.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Give me your sense of these statistics, and I want to go over some of them, regarding illegal immigration. According to the Department of Homeland Security, as of 2013, at least 11.4 million illegals were living here in the United States. Pew puts the number at 11.3 million. And they estimate that at least 8 million illegal aliens are in the U.S. workforce. Now, the pandemic has certainly caused a spike in unemployment for U.S. citizens. Given the way the president is courting amnesty and encouraging foreign workers, what impact would an influx of illegal immigrants mean for the workforce and the economy?
Well, as you mentioned, those data points are from about 6 or 7 years ago. So we don't have a recent number, although I think we have pretty good reason to believe that it's somewhere between 11 and 15 million. Still, under the president's proposed outline, what he would like to do is grant amnesty to almost all of them. That means lifetime work permits immediately for 11 million, 12 million, 13 million folks. You mentioned 8 million of them are already holding jobs. Many of them are holding those jobs illegally, obviously, if they're in the country illegally. So they would get immediate authorization, but then you're opening up the labor force for another 3, 4, 5 million workers. And you've got tens of millions of Americans who have not only lost permanent work, but they've also seen their hours reduced, their wages reduced as a result of the COVID-19 pandemic. So when you're adding more labor to the labor market, that's only going to hurt those that are looking for work, trying to get more work themselves, because they're going to have to compete against that larger labor force.
Mm-hmm. Now, just this week, a federal judge in Texas blocked President Biden's executive order putting a pause on deportations for 100 days. This judge issued a 14-day temporary restraining order nationwide. Now, earlier this week, ICE indicated that it was going to ignore that order because they need to remove, they say, these dangerous criminal aliens from the country. Your reaction, where does this go from here?
Yeah, this order from the judge was interesting. This is the sort of judicial warfare that was used in the previous administration, where everything that it seemed that Trump had signed got challenged in the courts, and the courts almost immediately issued a nationwide injunction. But this one in Texas was for good reason. One of the prior deputy directors at Homeland Security, Ken Cuccinelli, had signed some enforcement agreements with these states that guaranteed that Immigration and Customs Enforcement would enforce the laws in particular states, Texas being one of them. And that's really what the judge used. And they also used the rationale from the DACA ruling from the Supreme Court that the action taken by the Biden administration was careless and capricious. So they basically, in essence, rushed their decision. Remember, Immigration and Customs Enforcement, most of the women and men who work for ICE, they're law enforcement officers. So they're there to enforce and uphold the rule of law. And they're being told, no, you can't do that. So obviously there's going to be pushback from ICE. We've now seen pushback from the states that has led to a court-wide, nationwide injunction, and we'll have to see what happens from here. But it's a good step in the right direction that they're at least treating these executive orders from Biden the same way that they did in previous administrations.
Chris, I need to get into this business of separating families at the border. Biden made much hay about this during the last election, but it was the Obama-Biden administration that started this practice. Biden's now saying the government has to work to reunite these families. What gives here? What's the truth?
Well, for starters, many of the children that are still separated from, quote unquote, separated from their parents that are in the government's custody, they either can't locate the parents, or they have located the parents and the parents haven't simply just not come to get them, or the parents are outside of the country and can't get here to pick up their kids. So I just wanted to make that point. But unfortunately, our current immigration laws actually requires this. If you're going to charge people for crossing the border illegally, detain them and put them before an immigration judge to have their case heard, what do you do with their children if their children come? You're not going to incarcerate the children as well. And there's the current Flores settlement agreement that says that the government can only hold children for a certain period of time. So they have to release the children eventually. So it just, by default, the law requires that the government, if they're going to enforce the law requires them to separate the parents from the children if these parents choose to cross the border illegally with their minor children. And it's the law that needs to be reformed. It would be much easier if they allowed the government to detain the families as units, keep them together rather than separating them, obviously.
Yeah, well, they also, that because of that, I think it's the Flores rule that you referenced there, there is an incentive, and some of these human traffickers, they bring children across the border. So it's, and I've heard this from border agents. I'm one of the few reporters who actually been down to the border, interviewed agents, spent time with families, pulled them out of the Rio Grande. When you talk to those agents, they will tell you some of these children are being trafficked, and it's up to border enforcement to figure out, is this a real family unit or not? And they have to extricate the child from that parental group, from that family unit, to figure out who's who. And in some cases, that's not their biological family. So the government is actually doing a favor protecting the child in that instance. So there are a lot of complexities here that I think the, children in cages separating families line, that jingo, misses.
Right. And you have to remember that the situation from which many of these children come to the United States, the situation that they came from. In a lot of cases, they're very critical of the way that, the ICE facilities are. Well, these kids are sleeping in, concrete boxes and there's fencing but it's still probably better conditions than where these kids came from. But besides that, you're absolutely right. It's the human traffickers are using these children as pawns to try to get other people across the border illegally. And we've even heard reports that some of the children are being, quote unquote, recycled. It's a horrible term when you think about it, but that's what's happening. They're using the children over and over and over because you have, like, the current administration, for example, appears to be completely against any sort of DNA testing to guarantee that the person that the child is actually traveling with is the child's legal guardian.
No, it's a critical point. And look, I've been to these facilities. They are not pretty. They are, but these are temporary detainment centers when they first come across the border. Then if the children are held in government custody, truth be told, they move them to other facilities that are really akin to summer camps. I mean, they have, ping pong tables and they go outdoors, they play ball. It's a very different thing. And those are privately run facilities. People don't fully appreciate what this is because they've never been down there. And it's up to an incumbent upon reporters to do more work to show the American people the complexities, and it is complex. There's no, one answer here. Chris, before I let you go, did you find it at all curious that Joe Biden has a bust of Cesar Chavez on his credenza in the Oval Office? What do you make of that?
It's quite interesting, and it's part of this whole rewriting history. We'll rewrite the parts of history that we want to rewrite, and we'll ignore the bad parts of the history that we want to ignore. At the end of the day, Cesar Chavez led farm workers down to the border to revolt against people who are crossing the border illegally to take jobs away from American farm workers. He had a very aggressive process or very aggressive thoughts on how we should stop illegal immigration, especially ones that threaten the American farm worker labor force. So it's quite ironic that, on day one, the Biden administration releases this plan to grant amnesty to folks who are in the country illegally, yet he's sitting in front of a bust of somebody that was, for most of his lifetime, 100% opposed to illegal immigration.
Yeah, no, because it diffused and weakened his negotiating power. I mean, he didn't want people competing with the citizens here and the farm workers that he was organizing, which makes sense. We'll leave it there. Chris Chmielenski, thank you for being here. And you can find more of Chris's work at NumbersUSA.org. Chris, thanks again.
Thanks so much for having me.